Hello and welcome to Contra Mundum. I am your host, Andrew Isker, and with me is my co-host, CJ Engel. Hello, CJ.
What's going on?
Not much, just excited to be here with you. I've been waiting all week.
Should we,
like always?
Should we share like how close we were to not recording this?
Yes. You should tell them of the emergency that almost took place right before we get going.
Yes, I live in the mountains, and the power goes out whenever there's a big storm, and the power had been out for 30 hours, and I messaged Andrew, and I was like, I don't know if we can do it, and he was upset, and I was like, listen, retweet this, and the power will come back on, and sure enough, within 5 minutes of a retweet, the power came back on.
That's how powerful my Twitter has become.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It's I can even control the power grid in California. That it really is. It really is something else. Speaking of powerful things, we CJ first right off the bat wanted to talk about for our first segment, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, of my parents' vacation home state. It's very near and dear to my heart. This wonderful man, Ron DeSantis. So we have a clip that CJ wanted to play of Governor DeSantis on the Blaze with Glenn Beck. Correct?
Let's do it.
Out of state of emergency.
Oh yeah. And the only reason
Texas is not.
Yeah.
I just talked to the Freedom Caucus yesterday. Really? When are we going to get out of this?
And actually, what we did, so we did the state of emergency for about a year. The only reason I kept it is because I used the state of emergency to force the schools open. So I had to get through that first school year to ensure that all schools in Florida would be open. I probably would not have been able to do that absent the state of emergency. So that was our leverage because I can control money. Basically, state of emergency allows you to move money around a little bit more. So we did that. It also allowed me to overrule local governments, and particularly some of the liberal governments, and say, you're not going to be penalizing people for masks, no business closures. We set that down, and I needed the state of emergency to do that. Then the legislature came in the next spring, and we made these protections permanent. And I asked them, I said, do a bill to rein in the governor's executive emergency powers and to rein in local governments. And so Florida actually has constricted the powers. One of the crazy things about this, and you'd appreciate it, it was almost not questioned in American history that these local governments have like these massive health problems, like emergency health problems.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, it's like, but I couldn't find. So one of my concerns when I'm fighting back against this, I was afraid I was going to lose in court on some of this. The law was not great on it, but I think what happened was I was strategic in when I was pulling these levers so that when I would do it, I had like a lot of business guys excited, people going back to work, and it made it harder for a county to try to sue me to basically throw people out of their jobs. And so we were able to get through that, and I never lost a case in all the things that I was doing.
That's it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, this right here is like textbook demonstration of like what is wrong with having an idealist perspective of politics, where there's absolute principles that have to be applied in an absolute way at all times. You basically limit yourself from being able to respond to specific situations. I mean, the state of emergency in American history has long been a justification for government overreach. But like even liberals like Friedrich Hayek have pointed out time and again that sometimes the best thing that can be done is the extension and application of authority of even dictatorial efforts to combat socialism or leftism or what have you. The state has to have these reins from time to time. And Hayek has actually gotten I don't know if you remember this, but like during the libertarian years, everyone would the left would go crazy when people brought up Hayek, because Hayek was not really like a purist libertarian type like Murray Rothbard or something, and he was probably more of a social democrat than even someone like Mises. But Hayek had pointed out sometimes, and he was specifically responding to the Marxist situation in Latin America and the context of Pinochet. I mean, he was an advisor for Pinochet after he had captured power, after he had taken the Marxists out. He basically brought in a bunch of classical liberals from America and asked them for advice. And Hayek was pointing out that sometimes it's actually better to have a dictator capture power and apply liberty against the totalitarian administrative states in these various countries. And sometimes that's what the state of emergency is for. And Hayek pointed out, he's a liberal, and he got this from Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt wrote his classic treatise on dictatorship, basically arguing that in order to forestall some sort of right-wing reaction, Hitler, was basically going to come out of that. In order to stop that type of situation from happening, before it even happened, Carl Schmitt was saying that they needed to capture power and they needed to put an end to this vague use of power. They needed to basically front run it. Schmitt argued this in the 20s and 30s and in the 20s, and then Hayek took up this same mantle and argued the same thing in light of Marxism. And that's exactly what DeSantis just did. So it's funny because a couple of days ago, I basically had a tweet saying I don't want to like DeSantis, right? Because what he's making me do is he's giving the regime, the overarching administrative state regime, the two-party system, he's giving it legitimacy. I don't like that because I want to delegitimize the state. But this is a very good and even swaying type of behavior and type of justification for behavior from DeSantis that I absolutely endorse and love. I mean, that's the perfect answer. Is I used the state of emergency and I kept the state of emergency in order to attack and confront actual threats to the well-being of my people.
Yeah,
I love it.
I felt the same way. I probably retweeted. You didn't send me a DM. Please retweet this so my power comes back on. But I think I retweeted that one too. Exactly. I don't trust him. I still don't trust him. Even after,
Right.
there was the survey with Tucker on Ukraine, on the Russo-Ukrainian war, that Tucker sent to everyone that's been floated out as president, whether they've announced or not. And so DeSantis's team compiled a statement on it, and it was largely really good what he said about Ukraine. It's not our problem, not our business. But even that, like there's so many things, and of course Trump had one as well. I think it was him, Kristi Noem, and Trump were the only ones who maybe Vivek did too, but he's kind of an afterthought. And that gave an answer that was saying this is not our concern. We have bigger problems in America and so forth. Things like that. Trump, of course, was really good, like he always is on foreign policy, where he said, basically without saying verbatim, we should get out of NATO. Saying we should get out of NATO. These European countries should take care of themselves. They're rich countries. They're fleecing the United States for their own security. And of course, embedded within that is the entire geopolitical order that America dominates. We pay for their security in order to dominate all of these countries. But nevertheless, Trump's statement is about blowing that whole thing up. DeSantis didn't go that far, and that's one of the things that gives me pause about him. Actually, is I remember. I was still a teenager in high school when George W. Bush was first elected to the presidency, and in 2000, and I remember him running on having a humble foreign policy. He was running against Al Gore, who had the legacy of the Clinton years. The Bosnian, Serbia conflicts, Somalia, all of these different conflicts around the globe, which at the time seemed like the United States had its fingers in everything after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and so Bush's whole strategy was a sort of strategic withdrawal is what he proposed as he campaigned, and then of course he becomes president, and what happens? He invades Afghanistan and Iraq and sets up this disastrous foreign policy at the beginning of the 20th century that we're still reeling from. And so, forgive my voice, by the way. They attacked my voice this week, and I'm trying to drink as much White Monster as I can. Monster Ultra. Not a sponsor of the show yet. But at any rate, I feel I get the it's weird. It's hard to make an argument saying, I get the same vibes from DeSantis as I do George W. Bush in 2000, but you kind of do. You're trying to contrast from from the Biden administration, the things that they've done within the realm of foreign policy, and at the same time you're running against Donald Trump, whose biggest feather in his cap is how much of an opponent to the regime that he is, and has clearly demonstrated that by what they did to him on this issue. Like this is the single most important issue is foreign policy, and he was as good as a president possibly, I think realistically, could be from 2016 to 2020.
Yeah.
And so
I
is
also
DeSantis that good? I don't think so. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think he's going to be bad on China. I'm really
Yes.
wary of this bipartisan confrontation of China, and I think Russia is basically, I mean, they're allied with China, and I think China is basically more powerful than Russia, and Russia is a route
Yeah.
to China. So I don't trust him at all on China. And in fact, this is kind of one of those things where I like a lot of what Tucker says and what he's trying to do and the voices that he's trying to give a platform to. But at the end of the day, I think that Tucker is allowed to be on there, and I think he's really going to push for China confrontation. And I think DeSantis is right in that mold, and I do not want any confrontation with China at all.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciated Trump's almost bellicosity against China in terms of trade, in terms of manufacturing, trying to repatriotize industry in the United States. I mean, that was largely
but that needs to be a case made against the American politicians.
Yes, and that's largely what he was doing. I mean, he was doing that as this foreign country as a foil, as well.
Yeah.
Like not where it's much easier to say this bad foreign country that sent us this virus. It's easier to do that than it is to say all these people are screwing you. Although he said both those things, right?
Mhm.
He said that these people are stupid and they're crooks. So I mean, both of those things are going on, but I don't think it's in the sense of we want to have this conflict with China so we can have factories here again. It's more so we want to dominate the Pacific and maintain our hegemony over the planet. And China is getting too big for its britches, and so we're going to butt heads with them at some level at some point. And so yeah, that's one of the things in terms of like observing politics is as soon as there's this uniparty consensus about something where we all agree about this issue, all right, that's dead center what the regime thinks. And until he demonstrates that he is able to buck that, which I mean, Ukraine does a little bit. I don't want to take away all the credit for giving the correct answer about Ukraine, but it's one answer. He's got to do more. I mean, I remember back in 2015 when you're observing this, like it wasn't like overnight I decided, oh yeah, Donald Trump's a good guy. Like he's not just this silly reality TV star. He should be president of the United States. It took time, and it mostly was who are the people reacting to him and hating his guts and saying anybody but him. We cannot allow this guy to become like if Bill Kristol and the neocons are starting to do this now after he spoke out against the Ukraine war. DeSantis did. But I mean, some of that it's like, okay, is this for show? Is this kind of pantomiming? That political theater that constantly happens, right? I mean, if they come out on National Review with an issue that says never DeSantis, and they get in all of the regime people like Russell Moore and Bill Kristol and all these people to say, oh, he's so horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe I will eat crow and say I was wrong about this guy. But like, there's a high bar to be able to prove it.
Yeah.
But if he passes that bar, like if he clearly demonstrates, okay, he is the guy, he's solid. I mean, this stuff that you see in this video is exactly what you would want him to do in Washington, because you're kind of trying to like navigate two different paths, right? You mentioned that, I mean, you want the regime to be delegitimized, and that of course is true. Like that's what I want too. I want people to look at DC and think, what a bunch of jokers. I want them to see stuff like, January 6th, the Epiphany, mostly peaceful electoral justice demonstration. I want people to see that and laugh at it because it's a joke. It's ridiculous. These people are clowns. Not the guy in the buffalo hat, like the people that got chased out, the guy in the big suit, the big gas mask suit, get waddling out of Congress. I want people to laugh at those guys because they are a joke. They are a sick joke, and that we should laugh at them. They're ridiculous.
it's funny, like so I'm about to get controversial here, but so and it's funny. I keep quoting keep quoting libertarians. Like I don't know what's wrong with me. Um, so Murray Rothbard said that one of the things that he hated most about Reagan was that he brought like an entire sense of legitimacy back to the GOP.
Yeah.
That was like one of the worst things that he did because I mean people don't want to think about it this way, but Reagan was basically a liberal internationalist. I mean
Yes.
Reagan was absolutely not this like in some way. Well, no, and in almost every way he was like an anti-Trump and anti-populist. All those things that
Yeah.
he was a liberal internationalist, but he had the rhetoric of a free market in a world where socialism was seen as the only alternative to the free market. Quote unquote free market just means the liberal internationalist capital managerial order basically is what
Yeah.
it means.
That's
But
what it really means. What it really means is that
yeah,
not,
in
not actual
practice.
free enterprise. Yeah.
But Reagan brought legitimate, and that legitimacy has played off for 25 30 years when we would have been in a much better place if the GOP had been like delegitimized and had gone away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so the geo I really am hesitant about believing them again. It's like Charlie Brown with the football.
Yeah, I was
How
going to
many
say Lucy in the football. Yeah.
how many times do we have to say this is the guy? This is the guy. Every
Yeah.
single GOP president ever has expanded the size and scope of the federal government in the worst
Yeah.
ways possible. I mean, Bush 2 is probably one of the worst presidents since FDR, like hands down. And so like
Yeah.
and he ran on a platform of non-intervention and no nation building. So yeah,
I know.
I don't believe DeSantis. Is it possible that he's good? Yes, it's always possible that he's good, but I'm not going to fall for it again. I'm
Yeah.
just
Exactly.
I'm not going to play that game.
No, no, and nor should you. I think, and I think this is what people really ought to do. I mean, some of it is, I have friends that say, "Well, just enjoy the show." It's all fake, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't think it's. I mean, in one hand, it is fake. In one hand, it certainly is. Um, uh, but on the other, like you said, there is the scant chance that he could be the guy. But more likely than not, here you put this guy in office and he uses this shrewdness that he clearly has, right? This what he's demonstrated in Florida, that he can wield the power that he's given, effectively. And he knows how to do it.
I think what he has behind him is I think he has people that spend time on the online right and recognize the rhetoric that they like to hear, and they recognize
Mhm.
some of those strategies that I don't think someone like Trump, I don't think he has his ears close to the ground because the world is different than it was in
Yeah,
2020. I mean, he had his heart, like he had his instincts were on the pulse of like the American heartland. And I think that
hmm
DeSantis, the whole world has changed since then. And there's a lot of people who frequent Twitter who communicate some of these themes to DeSantis, and he picks them up and uses some of them.
I mean, for all we know, he's seen your tweets about Carl Schmidt. So, I mean,
Now,
really, I mean, I'm not kidding. Like I have tweets that get picked up, yeah, jokes that I'll tell on Twitter and Gab, and then lo and behold, it ends up in the Babylon Bee. The same joke. Weird.
yeah,
Maybe we're great minds. So it's like it's a small, like, honestly, the internet is a much 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 smaller place than people think. And I mean, we have people we know that go on Tucker Carlson's show, like the most popular show, just slightly behind Contra Mundum, in on the planet.
yeah.
And so, like, it's a small world. And there's very few people that are pushing ideas out there online. And so, yeah, is he seeing this stuff and understanding this stuff? Yeah, I mean, just look at how he has employed Chris Rufo, who is another one of these guys, which I again, like, everyone thinks I'm like this mega anti DeSantis guy. It's like, no, I want to give him credit where credit is due, and what he's done that's really well, that he's done really well. Um, it's that this exact point that if he goes to Washington and uses this shrewdness, all he's going to do is bolster this GOP that is totally devoted to the globalist American empire. Even if that's not his intention, right? I mean,
Mhm.
even if I give the man the benefit of the doubt and say, like, in his heart of hearts, he is a good guy, and really cares about, you know us and our country and everything else, right? Just totally give him the benefit of the doubt. Um, if he goes to Washington And he does this, and he gives legitimacy to the GOP. He gives legitimacy to the federal government. Makes people think, oh, maybe the Department of Justice, which is currently, trying to put a man in jail for memes. I just wrote about this. I'll talk about this later. They're trying to put Ricky Vaughn in jail for 10 years over memes. That same federal government, the same one that subverted a presidency and all of that, and shut down the entire country, all of this. That same one is now going to have legitimacy because of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna lend the good things he's doing to them to be legitimate. Whereas if he stays in Florida, somehow if they allow him to go past the term limits, if he's able to stay in Florida, he would be a much bigger thorn in their side and do more to delegitimize the federal government as a governor, actually. So that's and the national GOP as well, and showing that he's charted this effective path for other GOP governors to do. So that's more or less, I mean, on DeSantis, and more. There's going to be more stuff that comes out because eventually he's going to announce that he's running, and we'll see what happens.
I do want to say for the record too, like despite what I said about DeSantis, I'm not like a Trump eternalist. I think he's really not doing. I think he's really putting a really bad foot forward right now. He's acting insane. I think it's ridiculous. So
yeah, the fact that he's not on Twitter is one of the problems actually, and just the rhetoric that he's not pursuing. I saw someone post on Gab. I can't remember who it was. Otherwise, I'd give them credit. But basically saying that that what's he going to do, like, rhetorically campaign on? It's like, oh, give me another chance to drain the swamp. Like, well, you failed to drain. I mean, and listen, nobody was a bigger Trump guy than me, and I was huge. I was very happy that he won. I mean, overjoyed, and defended him and gave him a lot of benefit of the doubt over the 4 years of his presidency.
Yeah.
But he failed. I mean, he failed to be able to wield the nominal power that the presidency actually has to against these guys effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only like rhetorical strategy he can go to, and maybe he's going to get there, right? Maybe he is and he started to a little bit in one of the speeches. He said, "I'm your retribution" or something like that. Like, he has to like amp up the language. Like, he has to do more. He has to. I mean, it's as we're recording today, it's March 16th. The day after the Ides of March. He has to do a lot more Caesar talk if he wants to be president of the United States again. And because, like, he needs to say, like, there's going to be justice done. He needs to do the Papa John's, a day of reckoning is coming, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what he's got to do, man. Like, that's the only card he can play at this point, because he can't just say, drain the swamp really this time, build the wall for real this time. It's no, the time for a wall is over. We're going to war with Mexico, right? Like, that's the stuff he's got to say.
Yeah.
First day, I'm going to ask Congress to declare war on Mexico. We are wiping out the cartels. It's over, right? And we're sending anybody who is on the side of the Mexican government and on the cartels, they're going back. And I'm going to use the military to like that kind of stuff. I mean, like, that's the rhetoric he has, because also what will happen is he would gain massive support like he did the first time. Because he's amped up this rhetoric and charged people up, and secondly, if he wins, it gives that rhetoric a mandate, right? I mean, we could talk about theories of politics and democracy and everything else, but it's like, if a guy wins saying that kind of stuff, that means he has a mandate to do those things that he said he was going to do. I mean, no matter what you think about electoral democracy or whatever, that remains true. Like, there's still some popular will that is, as messed up as our system is, that's shown when someone wins an election legitimately, campaigning on a certain issue. So we'll see what happens here as the presidential race goes on, because I mean, that might be the only card he can play, and it will be very interesting to see if he does. But speaking of the presidency, the current president, the current occupant of the White House, had some things to say about transgenderism. He made some comments this week, and I wanted to get CJ's thoughts on them. I'll play it right now.
Their kids is a really harder thing. What's going on in Florida is, as my mother would say, close to sinful. I mean,
Pause
it's
it.
just terrible what they're doing. It's not like
No, we can we can talk about this more after the clip. But I want people to pay attention to the words like sinful. They're using Christian language from our Christian past in order to advance their agenda. That's extremely important for understanding
Yes.
what's going on and how we got here. So go ahead.
Yes. We'll continue playing.
a kid wakes up one morning and says, I decided I want to become a man, or I want to become a woman, or I want to change. I mean, what are they thinking about here? They're human beings. They love, they have feelings, they have inclinations that are, I mean, it just, to me, is, I don't know, it's cruel. And the way we do it is we make sure we pass legislation like we passed on same-sex marriage. You mess with that, you're breaking the law, and you're going to be held accountable.
Yeah, I mean, state enforced transsexualism is coming, and it's not. I mean, at first that was like a Sam Hyde meme, but it's real. It's very that's what he said.
And that was it was just homosexuality, state enforced.
Well, no,
homosexuality.
I use that.
And
Yeah.
now it's upped even further. Like we're further
Right.
down the slippery slope. Like you said, man, it is mind blowing to me. And I should preface this by saying, like, this guy, Joe Biden, is like the desiccated husk of a human being that's barely animated. Like he's obviously not in charge of anything. He doesn't make real decisions. It's not like he's sitting in the Situation Room deciding, sitting on the phone, calling the generals and saying, all right, I want you to attack this sector over in Ukraine. Like he's not in charge of anything. He doesn't,
Right.
His mental faculties aren't there. I mean, even just to do that interview, which is a little bit older, I think it's, from a month or two ago. He, even to do stuff like that, they got to hop him up on so many drugs. I mean, really, it's amazing what the pharmaceutical industry could do just to get to that point. But at the same time, the symbolic importance of the human being who occupies that office is meaningful.
Right.
It matters who he is and what he's saying. Even if he, in terms of like the power that he's wielding, doesn't really matter because it's his whole administration and the people in the White House that make the decisions. But him saying this stuff from his office, is meaningful. And
Well, it's symbolic. So I mean,
it says something about our country. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, whenever you have an elite who are actually in control of things, you need their frontman, whoever is like formally in charge of something. They need to repeat your slogans. They need to repeat your narratives. They're a mouthpiece for your agenda, so that everybody recognizes not only what the agenda is going to push, but also if people recognize that they've been defeated and that they're an occupied people. So that's part of this too. It's like this ritual humiliation, so that when you know that something is extremely demonic and wrong about the transsexual movement, they counter those instincts with their own language of sinfulness for opposing it. That's part of the ritual humiliation. They're making you super agitated. They're making you frustrated because that's the language of sin and right and wrong is language that's so inherent, not only in Christians, but also just in human beings naturally as God's created order. So they use that language in a way that really bites, really gets under your skin. And it's part of this process of reminding you who's dominating the political scene. That's why it's important.
Yeah, exactly. Like he himself does not matter, but it signals, like you said, that they're in charge and we're not. They have power and we don't, and that you were I mean, just listen to the language and the rhetoric that he's employing there. And this is of course an incredibly manipulative person, but the language that he's employing there is that you're a bad
religious.
person.
It's religious.
You're an evil person. You are a sinner.
Mm-hmm.
You are a sinner, as his mother would say. You are a sinner if you oppose letting people be whatever they want to be.
Yeah.
Right? If this guy says he's a woman, who are you to deny that to him?
Yeah. This is and again, I always cite books because that's what I do. But so the best book on this is Paul Gottfried's Multiculturalism and the Politics of Guilt. Excuse me.
Oh, they attack CJ.
They got me. Actually, I just choked on a piece of our sponsor, Greco Gum. So use this wisely and safely. Yeah. So make sure.
That
Yeah.
mastic gum is going to be in your stomach for like 15 years now.
Right. Exactly.
So-
Yeah. So that book, though, The Multiculturalism and the Politics of Guilt, because he basically just describes our current regime as the fusion of therapeutic themes, right? Because that's what Biden did, is he appealed to people's emotions and feelings and their own subjective view of themselves as being something that can be constantly changed and pursued. Like that's what transsexualism is. Whatever you think of yourself, you can be that. That's like that very, very therapeutic language. So
yes.
Paul Gottfried argues in that book that our present regime is the fusion of therapeutic model or therapeutic framework of man with a secularized Puritanism. So all that language, the religious language of sin and good and evil, all those things fuse together with the therapeutic movement, and that's why he calls our present regime the therapeutic state. So
Yeah.
I
think
I like that synthesis.
it's a good explanation, because I think even it goes into also when we talk about wokeness. I mean, that was a discussion this week, is that, oh, you can't define what woke means. What does woke mean? Well, you can't define it. It just means you hate black people or something. Like that was a talking point this week.
Yeah.
In the discourse.
Well,
And
they're losing those types of arguments are really losing their ability to have any meaningful sway on things. It's funny. It's funny.
It is really funny, and but it's at the same time, like, the defining or understanding what wokeness is. I mean, I've talked about it in this way, and I hadn't read Gottfried's book, and now I'm going to have to. That it is, and some of it is, the mold bug thesis of the Puritans and dominating American culture, and that modern leftism and progressivism is just Puritan postmillennialism without God.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly some truth to that. I think you could see that. I mean, I'm sure you've listened to Murray Rothbard's history series on the progressive era, and that was his thesis as well.
Yeah,
that the progressive era was just this this proto woke movement where they didn't actually even really believe in God anymore, but they still had the forms of
right.
of that religion. And you see it here as well, that it's this therapeutic quasi. I mean, there's still this, they still believe, like, you see this too with all sorts of libs. They aren't like your fedora tipping atheists at all. Like, that's mostly gone away. That's mostly just guys like James Lindsay, right? And
Right.
books like that. They still believe in God, right? They believe in God in this ironic sort of way, where it's meaningless, right? Their belief in God doesn't really mean anything other than, if you need to be a nice person, just be
Right,
nice.
exactly. And we talked about this
Show
weeks ago.
kindness.
We talked about
Yeah.
this. We talked about this. The present regime is not going to put a gun to your head and say, deny Christ. That's not the model that they're using. They're saying
No.
that Christianity is defined by accepting perversions, accepting degeneracy. That's what Christianity is to them.
Disorder. Yeah.
Yes, that's the model that we're facing. So they're going to use language like love. They're going to use language like sin and good and evil. And you will pay retribution for your sins. You will need to seek redemption in the models that they're going to set up for you. I mean, that's exactly what's happening. It's secularized theocracy.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and along those lines, I mean, you see how ostensibly conservative evangelicalism has begun to syncretize with this. I mean, we see it all over the place with regime evangelicalism, regime evangelicals, we like to call them, and to that end, there was a clip. It's a little bit lengthy. We might break it up here a little bit and comment where Russell Moore, the former head of the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, and Rick Warren, who apparently until very recently was a Southern Baptist Convention pastor, had a conversation about women's ordination. And that's how Rick Warren got removed. His church got removed from the SBC over this issue of women's ordination, ordaining women pastors. So they had a conversation about this, and CJ and I would like to break it down.
Understand why people get upset about this, because I believed the way they did until 3 years ago. And I actually had to change because of scripture.
Okay, we'll stop right there. We'll stop right there already.
That's exactly what I was saying. They have to use the forms that like conservative evangelicals flock to. Like
Yeah.
using scripture to justify your arguments. It's just something that's so deeply ingrained in our culture that if you want to subvert it, you have to do the same thing.
Yeah, you're not going to use some other argument. You're going to.
Right.
Going to, I mean, it's what I mean right here. Yeah, who else uses scripture? Satan tempting Jesus.
Mhm.
Use scripture. Here's some scriptural arguments. Jesus, why you should bow down and worship me. So like they're doing the same thing. Right? They're doing the same thing. They're using the Bible to subvert the Bible.
Yeah.
So
That's what works here. That's what works in our culture.
Absolutely. So let's hear them out.
Culture could not change me on this issue.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Culture's not going to change me.
I live in California. I mean, so I live in California. I've been to Saddleback Church, and the entire California megachurch movement is embodied by Saddleback, where Rick Warren was pastor.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is a completely made up.
Like, buddy, your entire model of ministry is based on marketing Jesus to people. You're going to tell me culture couldn't change me at all. No, I'm standing firm on the Bible. Give me a break. All right, let's go.
Antidotes could not change me on this issue. Pressure from other people would not change me on this issue. What changed me was when I came to confrontation with 4 scriptures nobody ever talked about that I felt had strong implications about women in ministry. And nobody had ever shown it to me.
This is a video I should give credit to Woke Preacher Clips. You can find him on Twitter and Gab. Great content, great account. But this is his first proof text, Matthew 28:16-20. Here we go.
Now, Great Commission, go, make disciples, baptize, teach. You can't say, well, the first 2 are for men and women, the last 2 are only for men, or maybe just ordained men. That's eisegesis. You got a problem. Who authorized?
Sorry, Paul. Sorry, Apostle Paul, you're wrong. You want to know why? Because I've sold more books. Have you ever heard of the purpose-driven life? I know more than you do. That's eisegesis, Paul.
Women to teach? Jesus. All authority is given to me. Therefore, teach. All authority is given to me.
This is just, it's like so basic, it's not even worth talking about. You know, like the difference between your daily witness as a Christian in the world and your institutional restrictions within the church environment. I mean, like, come on. Like, it's not even worth getting into.
Yeah, I know, it's absurd. It's absurd. But it is worth getting into because this guy has so much massive influence over all of evangelicalism. So every pastor, in America, when Rick Warren talks, they're going to listen to what he has to say. Same thing with Russell Moore. Like you can't get away from it. So it's worth. I mean, but it's ridiculous that he makes this stupid, facile argument. But we'll let him keep going.
Therefore, baptize. You got a problem with the Great Commission. I had to repent when I actually looked at the Great Commission. I had to say, it's not just for ordained men. It's for everybody. On that day at Pentecost, we know women were
talking about Acts 1.
We know women were filled with the Holy Spirit. We know that women were preaching in languages that other people couldn't hear to a mixed audience.
Preaching.
We know women. It wasn't just men. Preaching. Women were preaching on the day of Pentecost. How do we know that? Because Peter felt obligated to explain it.
Okay, we'll pause there for 1 second. I mean, part of this, this manipulative stuff that these guys do is they don't make the distinction between somebody talking about Jesus, right? Somebody sharing their testimony, somebody, a mom teaching her kids in homeschool, like my wife does. I'm sure your wife does too, about the Bible. That's preaching, right? They have this huge umbrella of what preaching is. Anytime you talk about anything related to the Bible, that's preaching. And so you're going to say, well, we can't do that? What the Bible calls preaching is exhortation during corporate worship. That the pastor's role is liturgical. That he is leading God's people in worship, and he is dividing the word for them within the context of worship.
Mhm.
That's the role of the pastor. You see, I mean, it's a carryover from the Old Testament. That was the role of the priest in the Old Testament, was to lead liturgically through the sacrifices and to teach the law to God's people. The priests were always men. That's because Adam in the garden was a priest.
Mhm.
He was a priest. He was to guard and keep the garden, just as the priest was to guard and keep the tabernacle and the temple. Right? He's a priest. But because Rick Warren, his entire ministry model and much of evangelicalism that apes it from him is to keep people as ignorant of the Bible as possible. Because if you have a coherent understanding of what the Bible teaches from Genesis to Revelation, it's a lot harder to manipulate people. Right? It's a lot harder to manipulate people if they actually know the Bible really well. Because this is the kind of stuff he's doing. He's taking these one verse here and there out of context and absolutizing them over the entire Bible. Is the game that these people play. Like you said, they have to use the Bible to make these cases. And you see this with homosexuality as well, when they're like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal, or the Bible whispers about homosexuality. Well, they have to rip things from context and say, well, we care more about love and kindness and gentleness, and so we can't be offensive. So that's what he's doing here, and he's doing this as well with these verses, Matthew 28, Luke 24, John 20. The women, Mary Magdalene, coming to tell the apostles about Jesus. Another absurd argument.
The very first Christian sermon, the message of the gospel of good news of
A sermon, right? Again, a sermon.
Yeah.
He's saying this is a sermon. This is in the context of corporate worship, right? The assembled body of believers worshiping, as is described all throughout the New Testament and in the Old Testament. And that's what he's saying. This is a sermon that's being preached.
the resurrection. Jesus chose a woman to deliver it to men. He had Mary Magdalene go and tell the disciples. Now, that clearly wasn't an accident. It was an intention. It's a whole new world, baby.
It's a whole new world, baby. Absurd. I mean, just ridiculous. And the thing is, who is stupid enough to buy this? To buy these arguments, right? Who is dumb enough to be persuaded by this?
Did
right?
you watch
These are
the full
terrible
thing?
arguments.
Did you ever watch any other clips? Did Russell Moore push back at all?
No, I didn't watch it. I mean,
Okay.
you could just see from his body language here. Maybe I should. Maybe that's my assignment for the week. Because
I don't know if he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I doubt that he did. I mean, because you see his body language here, and he's nodding along. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Okay, yeah.
I
he's
think
not pushing back.
I think Russell Moore is the type that would push back a little bit and say, well, technically God did say that this person has to be a male, but it's but he would be very it wouldn't be any appeal to the created order, to the natural order, to the
No.
differences between man and woman. It would be
No.
this highly technical, technically you're right, but women are still, God's creatures too, and we should listen to what they have to say because they bring unique perspective to the church, and it'd be the same thing that we hear all over the place.
Well, and which is ironic because when he was at Southern Seminary teaching there, he wrote this, and I could dig it up. Right, he wrote this article defining differences between man and woman rooted in the created order. That was excellent. If you didn't know who wrote it, you would think, oh, did Doug Wilson write this? Right? Did Vodi Bakum write this? Wow, it must be somebody from our tribe that wrote it. And it's no, it was Russell Moore. He just went up through the ranks, and then the gay got a hold of him. Right? That's just
Right.
what happened. Right?
Right.
And either he was a snake the whole time and he infiltrated, or he got to the top and sold out. I mean, either way, that's what the guy is. Right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I'll go back and watch the whole thing, and we'll make a bet right now. I don't think he pushed back, even in the slightest. Right?
Okay.
We'll bet a pack of mastic gum.
Yeah, I'll bet. I bet you he pushed back a little bit, but with the same weird egalitarian qualifications.
Quasi egalitarian, yeah. Your words really soft, the softest, silkiest.
Yeah.
Complementarianism that could be. So we'll let him finish out his last.
Now he
argument.
has a woman go tell the apostles. Can a woman teach an apostle?
Okay,
Evidently,
okay.
did it on the first day. Teach
I can't, like, seriously, can you imagine, like, making the argument that because a woman one time informed the apostles of some current event, therefore she has, like, authority over them or something? Like, what kind of
to govern the
ridiculous?
church. Yeah,
I mean,
I
talk
know.
about eisegesis. Like,
I know.
like seriously, the women went up and told them something. Can you imagine, like, if there was some just like some breaking news about something, some new order from the like the Roman from Roman politics, and a woman told the apostles, informed the apostles of this, and suddenly like we have to use this as a justification.
Guess you're in charge now.
Yeah. Like, wow,
There you go.
that's really interesting headline. You know, you're now in charge.
Here you go. Enjoy your apostleship. It's just
Sorry,
absurd.
I couldn't hold
It's
back.
ridiculous. I know. It's so ridiculous.
Chose her to be the first preacher of the gospel. I understand.
Yes, he had four. I mean, it's like Rick Perry's list of 3 things.
Yeah.
He had 4, but he only gave 3. It just I mean, absolutely absurd stuff. But this is what these guys do. I mean, I've talked about this online quite often. Is that, you know, the regime evangelicals are not impressive. I mean, anything regime it's not impressive people. You don't have the best and brightest running things. They are not. I mean, you look at whether you want to talk about Joe Biden and his cabinet and his administration, and all the way down to Sam Brinton wearing a dress. Like all these are not impressive people. They are not impressive intellects. And in the past, we did have the best and brightest would be attracted to Washington, and now it only attracts midwits. It only attracts Reddit brains to Washington, like really stupid people that have credentials.
Yeah.
And the same thing for regime evangelicalism is, right, it's not, right, the most learned theologians who've studied the Bible and know it well. It's hucksters like this. I mean, this is what he's a used car salesman, right? That's what Rick Warren is. He's a very successful used car salesman selling Jesus. He sold a lot of late model cars to a lot of people in California. That's what he's done. Right, and you could see it in just the rhetoric that he uses, and the way he frames these things. He says, that's eisegesis. Well, it's like, no, everything you just did, buddy, is actually eisegesis. I mean, it's so ridiculous. But the problem is all of the seminaries, all of the denominations, all of the institutions, within conservative Christendom, listen to these people and take their calls from these people. Like they get their marching orders from these guys. So if you go to random evangelical church somewhere in America, right, the pastor is influenced by these guys, right? What he's allowed to say, what he's allowed to think about different, you know, cultural issues. These guys are the ones that program that into his brain. Because if you think like, you know, someone like me, right, then you or anyone else, like you're off the reservation, man. You're a bad person. And I mean, you see this in, I think I brought it up last week, but it's been a huge issue in the LCMS, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, that they put out that catechism where it was full of like woke stuff, where they were like downplaying pedophilia. They were saying, you know, it was full of like anti-white race hate, things of that nature, and people on the internet pushed back on it, and they said, oh, it's just a bunch of like alt-right Nazis that have a problem with the catechism. It's totally fine.
Did you see that? So
It's absurd.
Didn't Jordan, what's his name? Jordan Cooper, is that his name? Did he?
Yes. Yeah.
What did he have an opinion on that? He thought it was fine, right? I think he thought
mostly fine. I think he maybe pushed back. I mean, the thing you think Russell Moore probably would do with this, it's just a little soft pushback. You know, there might be some problems with the catechism, but the real problem is if we let these bad people dictate what we can and can't teach. The real problem is these anonymous online accounts. That's the real problem. I mean, that's what these guys do. Is they I mean, church. We don't want to think about it this way because we think, you know, the church is this institution that should stand outside of politics, but it is influenced by it. There's no way around that. It absolutely is influenced by political thought and political conditions. It's always been that way. And you can think, oh, we're not like the Roman Catholics in the Middle Ages. We're not being dominated by the popes and the kings and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, it's the same way. the culture, absolutely. Sorry, Rick Warren. You do change what you think because of the culture. You do change what you think because of
I was
who
going
is
to
in
bring that up.
power.
I was going to bring that
Absolutely.
up.
Give me a break to say that you don't.
Yeah,
Give
why
me a break.
are you talking about it right now?
Yeah,
You know?
why were you persuaded of these Bible verses
In
30
1995.
years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, come on. I mean, who is stupid enough to believe this guy? That's the thing. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable. And so my hope is that, by the stuff that we do here and that we say here, I mean, and guys like woke preacher clips, people putting this out there, because of the internet, that there will be more pushback within the church, within the laity, within congregations to say, no, this is not okay. Actually, this is bad. This is not what the Bible teaches. And we need to have a much more resilient faith. We need to have a much more a stronger faith in what God's word actually says and what God's people have believed for 2,000 years without question. Like there were no fights in the 5th century over what is a woman. What is the Bible? There's no fights in the 5th century or the 7th century, the 12th century, and church councils and schisms over is sodomy okay or not? I don't really know. I'm not really sure. Like there were no fights over this. It was a total, complete agreement of what men and women are, what's allowable sexual activity, and now modernism has changed all of it. So to say, oh yeah, now I just had this revelation that the Bible says this, and it really blew my mind. How about that? I mean, at least come up with a better argument than that, man. Like, come on. But the thing is,
it's just kind of funny what you just said, because it just really indicates that these guys pretend like they're sort of cultural like changers, but they're actually just cultural followers. They just go along with whatever, all the themes, all the narratives, all the rhetoric, all the priorities. It's all just like it's like liberalism like 7 to 10 years ago is kind of what they are.
I know. It's
terrible.
It's so ridiculous.
It's cringe,
Yeah, it is. I mean, definitionally. I mean, it's so ridiculous. I mean, I'm almost at a loss for words for it. And ultimately, what these guys do is, like they will be held accountable for it, either either temporally, now by the church, the people within the church, godly people within the church will rise up and push back and fight these people, or they will be held accountable by the Lord for the destruction they're doing to the church. And I mean, because like this summer, and I've had friends tell me this that are in the Southern Baptist Convention, like this is, at first I'm like, oh, this is great that they're kicking these churches out. Well, he has a ton of influence, obviously, and within the SBC. Mm-hmm. And I'm not an SBC pastor or anything like that, but I care very much about Christendom, generally speaking.
Well,
and
the SBC
and I want,
no, the SBC is just it's a really important like thermometer for what's going on in the world. Like
absolutely,
as the SBC goes, kind of there goes the culture. It's just a really good way to gauge what's going on.
Absolutely. Yep. And you should be, I mean, whether you're a Baptist or not, you should care about this and pay attention to it, because it tells you where we are at. And if they're able to ram through women pastors at this next convention or the next one or what in the near future, if it gets a huge showing, that's bad. That's really, really bad. And it means we have a lot of work to do, and it means a lot of pastors have to begin to show courage. And within the model, I mean, we talked about this just a moment ago, within the model of much of the evangelicalism, especially in the latter half of the 20th century, most of evangelicalism is religious consumerism, right? You are competing for religious consumers. That's why the worship is the way it is. That's why the architecture is the way it is. That's why the sermons are crafted the way that they are. You are competing to get people's attention and it's also, syncretized, like we said, with this therapeutic model, right? You're providing this therapeutic deistic God for them that always affirms whatever it is that they are, that never wants to make them feel bad, that wants to make them feel good and feel happy, and you're because your goal is to sell as much Jesus as you can, get as many butts in seats in your worship service as you possibly can. And so you're going to say all the things, you're going to carefully craft with marketing groups and focus groups exactly what you should and shouldn't say in order to get people in. in the doors and to buy Jesus from them. And you saw this last year, like during the Super Bowl and things like that. There was this ad campaign, right, about selling Jesus. And it's the same thing. Oh, he gets us, right? He gets us, and it's like that's what evangelicalism largely is. And so to say that it's not responsive to culture is just a bald-faced lie. It absolutely is, and this is a cultural barometer, and so it will take men who are willing to show real, actual courage in the face of the culture to be like Athanasius, like the moniker of our title of our show, to stand against the world, right? Mm-hmm. To stand against the world and say, no, I don't care what you think. This is what God says. Mm-hmm. This is what God says, and that's here I stand, right? That's what has to happen. So, along those lines, do we have enough time for our fourth segment? Do you think
we can do it?
Are you good for time? Okay, we're gonna have an extra long show today. So I will add this week. CJ had posted just the other day about World War II and delegitimizing the regime. And because there was a thread by Michael Tracy, the journalist Michael Tracy, who's often pretty good. I mean, he's on the left, but he's a critic of the regime nonetheless, if that makes sense. Kind of in the Glenn Greenwald mode, I would say. I put him in kind of that area. But he posted a book, a Yale University Press book, right? So at the heart of the regime, this book about World War II. And I think in a thread of excerpts from it, so I'd like to share it with everyone. We'll add this here. Maybe you could see this, maybe not. But if you can't, sorry. So he says, it's only recently that I've come to fully appreciate how shockingly impoverished the popular understanding is of World War II, and how centrally this factors into present-day propaganda. Be honest, what percentage of the population do you think knows the first thing about any of this? And so he goes, immediately after the Second World War, the victorious Allies carried out the largest forced population transfer and perhaps the greatest single movement of peoples in human history. With the assistance of the British, Soviet, and U.S. governments, millions of German-speaking civilians living in Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and parts of eastern Germany, assigned to Poland, were driven out of their homes and deposited amid the ruins of the Reich to fend for themselves as best they could. Millions more who had fled the advancing Red Army in the final months of the war were prevented from returning to their places of origin and became lifelong exiles. Others again were forcibly removed from Yugoslavia and Romania, although the Allies had never sanctioned deportations from those countries. Altogether, the expulsion operation permanently displaced at least 12 million people, perhaps as many as 14 million. Most of these women and children were under the age of 16. The smallest cohort of these affected were adult males. These expulsions were accomplished with and accompanied by violence. Tens and possibly hundreds of thousands lost their lives through ill treatment, starvation, and disease while detained in camps before their departure. Often, like Auschwitz I, the same concentration camps used by the Germans during the Second World War.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot going on.
Put in Auschwitz. Yeah.
And this is like, it's so hard to find the boundary for where you want to, on talking about all this stuff. But I think one of the things that I want to bring up, and I brought this up in my tweet. And by the way, this is the tweet that brought the power back on.
That's right.
But
we have to share it. Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, we don't have to share my tweet. But the thing that I really want to focus on is like, I am really deeply convinced that like the entire, and this is I'm kind of reading from my tweet, the entire contemporary American mythos is founded on the perceived nature and outcome of World War II. I really think that what people believe about the world is built upon what they've been told about World War II. I mean, this is the most consequential aspect of like intellectual hegemony that defines world politics right now, is people's perception of World War II. And
it's the
and
you sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, and you have people like Michael and the things that he's reading right here. 10 years ago, a lot of people that like read like David Irving and people like that, they knew all this stuff. But if Michael had tweeted this 10 years ago, he would have been absolutely never would have had a job as a journalist ever. ever. He would
Anywhere.
have been
Yeah.
not been published anywhere. But this is completely acceptable to say, and it's going viral right now because
Yeah.
I'm convinced that basically this narrative is collapsing in people's mind. And you can take this as far as you want. You can read David Irving and you can go, full bore on it. And I think a lot of it's interesting and people should read it. But regardless of what's happening, the fact that it's okay to question these things is a really important tell that the regime narrative is becoming delegitimized and is collapsing in people's minds.
Yes, and so yeah, the part here. I mean, I could read the whole thing, but the fact that no one knows that maybe like the bottom thing here, estimates of 500,000 deaths at the lower end of the spectrum and as many as 1.5 million at the higher are consistent with the evidence as it exists at present. So without getting into the deep weeds of demythologizing the Second World War and going to the furthest margins, this is what would happen. Like the second you question this, because this is the foundational myth of the globalist American empire, of globalism, is World War II. It is the Iliad of our culture.
100%.
It's or the Aeneid or whatever. Every I mean, if you understand this in history, every great civilization has its foundational myth, right? The Romans have Romulus and Remus, that the city came from them. I mean, think myth in terms of, not that it didn't happen, but myth in terms of this foundational story that you tell yourselves of what you are. Well, World War II is that for the globalist American empire. We are the good guys. I mean, that's why every video game about World War II, right? You play as the Allies, and you're the good guys, and you're fighting the Germans and the Japanese, and we're the good guys blowing up the bad guys, and they're evil. And it's this Manichaean story.
It's
right?
central to our identity.
We are all good, 100%. We never did anything wrong. We can't. And if you criticize anything that the American government did about World War II, other than maybe interning the Japanese, right? If you criticize it, that is, you love Hitler then, right? That's traditionally that's what would happen, is you must be a Holocaust denier, you must love Hitler, you must be an evil person because you have questions about World War II. You have questions about the foundational myth because it takes a religious it forms a religious aspect, right? Because it's this Manichaean story where we are on the side of good and truth and justice and what's right. We're on the side of history. They're the ones that are judged by history. They're the ones that are judged evil. And so if you say it's a lot grayer than that. Actually, it isn't this Manichaean thing. Like there were there's very fine people on both sides. Like if you do that, right, then you're an evil bad person who's sympathetic to evil. That's what people think.
You're allowed to say that there's good people on both sides on things like the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and the Gulf War. You're allowed to say that because it's not foundational. But but if you begin to even question, even like internally, if you internally begin to rethink just some of the narratives and priorities about World War II that you've been taught, you are like in an extreme dissident position, and they cannot let anyone think these things. These are extremely dangerous positions to hold because it cuts right to the heart of what it means to be the globalist American empire.
Yeah, because if this is like, again, I mean, foundational is the exact right word for this, because if there are cracks in this, if people don't buy it anymore, don't believe it, then they're not going to go die in a war with China.
This is way more important. See, in fact, okay, so one of the things that like the 1619 Project is doing is just trying to like encourage people to rethink the American founding. But to our current regime, people's opinion on the 1619 versus 1776 is way less important than people's opinion on World War II. People's opinion on World War II is extremely dangerous. It exposes how fragile the entire thing is. I mean, if you lose this war, if they lose the narrative war on World War II, they're done. They're done.
Yeah, exactly. They need to uphold this. I mean, that's why, for instance, like the meme of the soldiers landing on D-Day. And the what are they thinking meme, right? Of the soldiers landing on D-Day, and then there's the thought bubble, and then it's a picture of trans people or immigrant refugees getting off of the boats or whatever symbol of the modern globalist American empire that they obviously would abhor, right? They would say, turn the boats back, we're going home.
Right.
Right, like that's why it's a powerful subversive meme, because it's like, well, what were these guys fighting for? Because you have these like deluded, insane Antifa goons who think that like Dwight D. Eisenhower was an anti-fascist like them, and believed all the same stuff they did. And it's like, do you have any idea what these people thought? Like he would have thrown you in jail at a minimum. Like just for thinking what you think. It's so like it's at the very core of what they are. And so if you begin to question this, you begin, and because I remember this, back in our libertarian days, right? You begin to question World War II, and not from really an ideological standpoint, more so from like an anti-war standpoint. You'd read Murray Rothbard, you'd read these guys being critical of foreign policy decisions in World War II. I remember first encountering this with like Ron Paul saying like, well, we shouldn't have been in World War II, and like Blake Masters got in trouble for this during his campaign. An old like CrossFit forum post where he's saying, I think we probably should have stayed out of the war. I'm like, what? How dare you say that? And it's like, well, that's a basic anti-war libertarian position.
And by the way, it's also a basic conservative position, as it was happening in the 30s and 40s. All the conservatives said it was not our war; it's Europe's problem.
Yes, and honestly, I mean, other people say this, and I think they're right. Is that was the end of
The old right.
of conservatism in America was World War II. Like it effectively was outlawed. I mean, made illegal. Like you couldn't have the same opinions about geopolitics as Charles Lindbergh anymore.
100%.
Or you'd go to jail. Right?
This was like the intelligence community's like purpose of starting National Review with Bill Buckley, was basically like to create this conservative movement out of whole cloth that was given this like ex nihilo creation that basically pretended like anything outside of it in terms of foreign policy did not exist, never existed.
Yes, I mean that's what I mean. This is a topic that we'll continue to talk about in the coming weeks.
In fact, I will probably ask Paul Gottfried to come on and help talk about that. He calls it the Great Purge.
Yes, I think just a whole special episode on the old right, the death of paleoconservatism. Because I mean, really, I was thinking about this and trying to come up with a proper analogy that conservative liberalism. So really, like post World War II conservatism, Bill Buckley, National Review, anything that's not paleocon, it really is, and it's funny because it's like the exact opposite of the famous Buckley quote, right? Standing athwart history, yelling "stop," right? Is really what it is. Is you have these men, right? Imagine Bill Buckley sliding down from the top down a greased telephone pole. And desperately trying to say, stop here, stop here, stop here. That's what conservative liberalism is there is no stopping here, right? It is a free fall to the bottom. But they think like that's the facade is we can stop right here, this far and no further, right? We can stop the decline right here, and we'll keep it right here, right? That's why you have like these GOP politicians, sending out. Sending like I think Trump. Here's some criticism of Trump, right? He sent out who was Kim Kardashian's stepfather, Bruce Jenner, who's not Bruce Jenner anymore. He's like doing talking points on Fox News for the Trump team, right? Like he is the in-house transsexual for the MAGA movement. Besides Queen MAGA or whatever. Like that's what conservative liberalism is the liberalism of 5 minutes ago, because it has to be. It's saying, we're going to stop the decline right here, and so this is what the legacy of World War II is not saying, okay, we're going to maintain the same views, the same society, the same idea of ordering a society, the same ideas of government and political power and how it all should work as our grandfathers and our great grandfathers and 10 generations ago. We're going to try to maintain that same inheritance that we've gotten. That doesn't exist. You're just an individual, right? There's no past and there's no future. There's only the now, right? That's what conservative liberalism is. It's just to try to sand off the rough corners of liberalism right now, where it's going. And so yeah, it's the legacy of the Second World War, is this idea that we're the good guys and we were fighting for individualism, right? We were fighting for people to be able to be whatever they wanted to be, for democracy. That's what our values are, is democracy. And the way they define democracy is you getting to decide if you're a man, you could become a woman.
Yeah.
That's what individualism, that's what liberalism is. Not just like liberalism, like progressivism, like classical liberalism. That's where it ends up.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it has to go, is
Mm-hmm.
what we were seeing. Yeah, and I think this, I mean, with World War II, like for us, certainly for us, but also I think, like you said, this narrative is collapsing, and it doesn't mean that every single normie that's been educated in public school all of a sudden like was going to wake up tomorrow and say, oh, World War II isn't what I thought it was. What? Really?
Yeah.
We weren't the good guys. Totally. We did some bad things during the war. We killed 1.5 million Germans after the war. We firebombed Dresden for like no reason and just killed a bunch of women and children just cause.
Mm-hmm.
We could have accepted surrender from the Japanese and the Germans way earlier and negotiated an end and not given Europe to communists. Really? That FDR loved Stalin and the war was to preserve the Soviet Union? Really? Wow, that's interesting. That's not going to happen. Like, there is narrative, when we talk about narrative collapse, we're not talking about like 50% plus one of America realizing this. It's
never
a big enough faction, believe me.
Yeah, it's never any meaningful movement in history is never a majority. It's always a minority. You need a significant minority. You need a strategic minority, and that's all that matters. But seriously, like, think about how many people in the online right and even the online center, even Michael Tracy, were beginning to question these things. That is a huge tell that the regime narrative is a house of cards.
Yeah, and of course it's based on lies. Like you have to believe things that are not true in order to perpetuate these myths. And so a lot of it is, I mean, a lot of it, and some of it too, it gets more and more absurd. Like you have these World War II movies that are really ridiculous. And there's a new like Holocaust porn movie every couple years where it gets more and more grotesque and more ridiculous. And because it has to reinforce this narrative. Like there are never movies, very few. I mean, there was one about Holodomor a couple of years ago. But it wasn't produced by Hollywood. It was a foreign film. Actually, I think it was a British film. Hollywood will never produce a film that subverts the narrative about World War II. Mm-hmm. It will never do it because they exist as this myth-making entity. Like that's why they operate and exist. Is their goal is to preserve the mythos that upholds the whole system. So they're not going to do anything but make movies that show it. They're not going to show they're not going to show any of this stuff that Michael Tracy is talking about. Like, it's not in the popular mind at all. Just the utter devastation after the war and how many people just died, starved to death, were sexually abused by the Soviet. Like, just the idea, like, people, like, I mean, if you want like a movie that could be made, that should be made, and one day, God willing, will be made, is a movie about how evil the Red Army was. Like, the things that they want people to think about, like the Third Reich, which we're not standing for the Third Reich. We're not saying they were the good guys. It's that the Red Army is just as bad. They're just as bad, and in many cases worse. Like, because everywhere they would go as they were marching through Europe, they would rape anything above 10 years old. They would any woman, any girl, they would rape. I mean, it was a massive rape army. And like you're not allowed to talk about that because the myth is that you have to say the sole Satan involved there is Germany. We can't talk about the other Satan, which is the Soviet Union. We can't do that. That's not allowed because those were our allies. You can't say that we're allied with somebody as bad as Germany. Mm-hmm. Like that, but that's what happened. I mean, just the great evil that the Red Army did, the wanton destruction and human misery they put on the entire all of Eastern Europe suffered under. Like just now, I mean, this is part of what Tracy is sharing is this stuff. People are totally unaware of it. They just think like the war ended and the Allies won, and evil Germany was defeated. And what a happy day! It was like, you know, the end of a Super Mario level, right? He slides down the flagpole. You know, that's like the Reichstag flag, the Soviet Union flag coming up, and Mario's in the castle, and the fireworks are going off, and that's what the end of World War II was. Right. And
Right.
you don't see the like millions of women getting raped by the Red Army. No,
Yeah.
you don't see
I
that.
mean, the
No.
things that I mean, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people died from Germans died from starvation. They were kidnapped from their homeland. They were taken by train to Russia to work in labor camps. I mean, this was going on decades after and
Yeah.
during American occupation, American and British
Yeah.
occupation of Germany. I mean, this is and this was all. I mean, this was mostly. It was not mostly, but a large part of it was Soviet. But the Americans knew about it the entire time, and of course they didn't
Yeah.
teach this in schools. But there is
No.
some very serious complicity going on because the American and Soviet empires were basically the two victors in World War II,
Yeah.
and the Germans were extremely fairly untreated in a way that it's beyond people's like wildest and worst imaginations. I mean,
Yeah.
everything that's said about what the Jews suffered under the Third Reich is absolutely shared by what many of the Germans suffered as well. I mean, it's
Afterward. Yeah,
horrendous.
it's the same type of treatment, for sure. I mean, because that's what Tracy points out, is that like they didn't like tear down Auschwitz after they took it. Like they put Germans in there, and so Tracy saying this stuff is phenomenal. And other people. I mean, it's like you said, it's a signal. Because like they are this narrative has to crumble, right? And I look at it too, like you think about like what was done to Germany, the treatment that was done to the people there, they and like by the millions what the Soviets did to them. And you're thinking about, right, I think about my grandfather's brother who died, was in a bomber crew on a B-17, bombing Germany. And I'm thinking like, well, what did he die for? I mean, he's been this hero in our family since the war. Like we every Veterans Day, Memorial Day, we honor him as we should.
Mm-hmm.
And you begin to think, and just about everybody in the country has someone in their family like that. They either fought in the war or died in the war. And you think, okay, well, what did they fight for? Like they fought to. I mean, they didn't know this. Obviously, he's not sitting in the bomber like shooting at German airplanes, thinking, "Oh boy, every German plane I shoot down, that's one fewer that the Soviets have to shoot down." And I can't wait till the Soviets win. I really love Stalin. Like, no, they're not thinking that. They're thinking that my country's at war with this other country. We need to fight them. We need to win. So they're not thinking that at all. No, nobody was. But ultimately, what did their rulers and FDR, what did he have them fighting for? Well, it's to preserve the Soviet Union, and that's horrible. That's terrible. And to be able to do these great crimes against another country. I mean, you want to talk about like the globalist American order. I mean, really, it starts in Nuremberg. Like there was no Nuremberg for the crimes that the Soviets committed, right?
Right.
Stalin murdered tens of millions of people, mass famines, put people, millions of people in gulags, and there's no temporal accountability for those people. People don't even know about it. People have no idea how evil the Soviet Union was. There is no great mythos about that surrounding that. There aren't there aren't movies. Like I said, there aren't movies. That's how people's imaginations are formed. There aren't movies about this at all. It's only they were kind of good because they were on our side, but they're not really that good. They're kind of bad. It's like this. They're kind of like the anti-hero that's on the side of the heroes. If you're talking like, if you put it in like Avengers movie terms, they're like, he's kind of a bad guy, but he's on our side right now. That's how they think about the Soviet Union, if they think about it at all. Right. If they don't think that they're positively good. And so I think if that narrative begins to take shape, where people aren't saying, oh yeah, and again, it isn't people saying, oh, the Third Reich was good, they were the good guys. It's people saying, no, this is much murkier and
Right.
grayer
Exactly.
and harder to under. It isn't the simplistic Manichaean struggle that we were taught that it is. It's much grayer. It's a much grayer area. Um, then like again, there's at least a vanguard of people who um, can oppose the globalist American order on a foundational level. That can oppose liberalism on a foundational level, to be able to say, look, this system that we have is not good, and it's not good from the very very bottom up. Not
Right.
just right like what it's turned out as, like from the very core of what it is, right from the very start, it's not good. That the paleocounts were right. We should have stayed out of that war and let Hitler and Stalin duke it out. That's what we should have done. Like you said, the Overton window has shifted. That people are able to actually begin saying this. So, but anything more on that subject that you wanted to say, or we've
I think you exhausted it.
okay. Well, we haven't exhausted. There's much more to say about it, but
Yes.
all that we could say today, we certainly have. But before we wrap up here, what stuff do you have for us? What content are you producing besides this?
Today was a slow week. I think I published one article at cjingle.substack.com, but follow me on Twitter at Contra Mordor, and I'm also on Gab at Contra Mordor. Those are the two things that you can check it out.
Well, very good. For me, I just published today an article about Ricky Vaughn. I said I would mention him in this podcast. More than anything else, pray for Douglas Mackey, who's under trial from the federal government for posting memes about texting in your vote to Hillary Clinton. I think I don't want to incriminate myself, so I'll plead the fifth of whether I retweeted him or not. I can't remember. I remember seeing it and laughing at least. But he's being tried, facing 10 years for sharing memes about the 2016 election, saying you could text in your vote for Hillary, and they're trying him under this obscure anti-Ku Klux Klan law from 150 years ago about voter suppression.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I mean, it's absurd. It was obvious satire, obvious joke that he told, and they can't even, apparently they can produce people that texted into that number, but they can't produce it so far, at least as far as the evidence that they've shown. They can't produce any witnesses to say, I, under penalty of perjury, I texted in my vote and I didn't go vote, and it was all because of this meme. They can't find anybody to say that they were actually victimized in any way. So they want to throw him in jail for a victimless crime. And even if it was, it's like, you think about that, like voting. Like, if you saw that meme and you thought that you could actually text in your vote and you didn't vote because of it, like, that's a competency test of voting. Like, you really, like, you probably should be voting if you see that meme and think, oh, I can just text this number, very convenient. Like that. Okay, maybe that person shouldn't vote anyway. He's helping us out here. But regardless, I mean, all joking aside, it is extremely serious because it's a huge threat to public speech, because the goal is Ricky Vaughn was an impressive poster, and he had an actual influence on the 2016 election when the internet was still a little bit freer or a lot freer, I would say, than it is now. But it's not that they want to put just him away in jail. It's that they want to criminalize speech and have a precedent to criminalize speech. They want to make anyone who posts memes on the internet afraid. They think, am I going to get a knock on the door from the FBI and go to jail for sharing this meme? Is this going to be considered treason if I protest the Ukrainian war? Right? If I post a meme about Vladimir Zelensky, or if I share a link about Hunter Biden's laptop, is that going to be considered Russian disinformation, and I go to jail over that? Like, that's what they want people to think. They want that in the back of everybody's head, so that way they don't have to spend so much time censoring the internet, shutting down speech, and setting up algorithms and AI to lock everything down. They can just make you scared. Right? It's a much more effective way of censorship. And so, anyway, it's very important. You can go to his website, memedefensefund.com, I believe, or look at I link to it in my article at news.gab.com. And please read that. Please pay attention to this case. It's extremely, extremely important. I liken it to the Rittenhouse case, just as the Rittenhouse case was a huge test of the Second Amendment, whether we actually have it, in fact, a Second Amendment or not. This is the same thing. This is like the Rittenhouse case for the First Amendment. And so, do we have a First Amendment, in fact, in reality, or not? Is going to be found out in this trial. So pray for him. It's hugely expensive to defend yourself from the federal government in a criminal trial, and so if you can afford to help him out, please do. There's a link in that Meme Defense Fund website. There's a link to be able to send him support in a Give, Send, Go or via crypto. So please do that. That's the only shilling we've ever done on the show, other than the joke about mastic gum. There's no shilling we'll do other than like.
It's not a joke.
This guy. Sorry, not a joke. Very serious. Very serious.
Very serious.
But yeah, look at that. There's other articles I'll have in the coming weeks. So I'm going to write about liberalism in World War II, hopefully, and just the rise of globalism.
Nice.
That's in the cards. Hopefully here in the next coming weeks. So pay attention to that. You can find me at Boniface Option at both Gab and Twitter. And other than that, looks like we're out of time for our guest, the poster. We're all going to make it. So sorry, I apologize to him. Otherwise, have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.